My guess would be probably, given that he's grossed over $5 million, probably over 250,000. Yeah, my guess is it's over $250,000 at this point, because it's this is part of why
82,000 sales.
Aside from the fact that I don't have the time and effort and energy right now to do a proper website for this content, but the other reason is I because of what you're talking about, I'm not sure I ever want to take donations, because I don't want to deal with the PayPal, oh dear God, and I'm not setting up a merchant account to take donations. I'm not doing it. It's like it's a waste of energy.
Anyway, but I think that for those kind of games, yeah, it's something when mostly the kind of game is you're creating. It's more the kind of games where you create a whole campaign and a whole storyline and all these things and voices and characters and missions. That kind of game where it costs a lot of money to develop and one person couldn't do it alone.
Well, no, it's like, and on that note, and that's in tune with the last comment down here.
And both kind of games are fun, but you know.
But it's like, well, honestly, I would argue that in today's media, aside from independent media, which doesn't cater to the, well, our Nielsen's predicted we should do this. In case you're wondering what I'm bitching about the fact that SYFY canceled Caprica to make way for Hollywood treasures. So I'm like, okay, so you're replacing something with a plot with yet more reality TV. That is a clone of the other 8 shows in this theme. I'm like, yeah. It's not. But honestly, really the form of entertainment more and more today is becoming the games. You know, it's, I mean, it used to, it was like, oh, your career had fell apart that you were in a game. Now you have the whole who's who of Hollywood trying to figure out how to do the voice acting for video games, because they realize that more people will see that than their Hollywood blockbuster. It's like, so, yeah, it's, on line of no way to make a smooth transition, what do we think about the, you know, everything will be good when we figure out how to make everything work on Direct 3D because OpenGL just sucks?
I wasn't aware that OpenGL sucked at all.
Yeah, that was kind of my reaction to that. I'm like, it's really just as capable. It's just,
I think there's been so little activity with it that people have honed their skills more in the direction of direct whatever. If those people with said skills would focus on OpenGL, it would be just as good. It would be,
yeah. It has nothing.
Especially with the newer versions of OpenGL, it is just as capable, if not more so.
Yeah, they are just as capable. They're on par 100%. And like you say, there's some niche things GL actually is capable of doing better. But it's not developed for in that way. You know, and honestly, this was exactly what Microsoft wanted when they made the Xbox. That was the whole point of the Xbox project. We don't care how much money it loses as long as it makes the standard of the game industry DirectX, which it did. It's like, and there's people who've like bashed on them for that, especially given that some of the comparisons between. And honestly, that's where comments like this come from. When they were debuting later versions of DirectX 9 and a lot of the DirectX 10 series, they were comparing it to OpenGL, and they were like showing an older version of GL, like 2-3 years back, compared to the latest and greatest DirectX, and doing like it's the same thing as when you go to the TV store and they want you to buy the gold platinum plated cables, so they plug those in using the HDMI connection, and then they have the TV next to it that's supposed to represent the crappy cables using a component connection. So I'm like, that's not the cable, that's the connection. I argue false advertising, but they get away with it. And it's very much the same thing with the perceived.
And that goes to another topic entirely. I don't know how many times I've mentioned Linux to somebody or mentioned it on a forum or something, And the immediate response is, well, I don't want to compile everything. What do you think? I've got all this time to compile my software?
Yeah, like I prefer to let somebody else do that and then download all their work in an ISO and then install it. It's like,
or the same thing goes with Fedora. Well, I don't want to use Fedora or Red Hat or RPM anything and deal with all the dependency hell that comes along with it. Really?
Well, but see, but that's the perceived thing. It's that's honestly, that was the whole reason for a package manager. It's like when I go to click a singular pack in Synaptech, this little thing pops up. The following codependent packs are required. Click OK to OK installing them too. Okay. It's like I'm 3 clicks away from a complete install at any point. It's like it very rarely does it allow you to install something without installing all the codependencies and all the other things that make it work. It doesn't let you do it. But if you didn't know that, you'd go, oh dear God, I have to verify I have the other 27 packs this needs.
I have experienced the dependency hell a long time ago. I've been using Fedora since Fedora Core 2, and Red Hat since, I think Red Hat either 9 or 8. I think it was 9. So, I mean, there were things that I installed that, it was difficult to get dependencies working.
No, see, that's the thing. I've been keeping an eye on Linux since the late 90s. I only recently, almost 4 years ago now, switched over to it as my primary desktop OS here, because realistically, it wasn't ready before that. It had problems like that to solve. They've been solved now. But people still talk about them. It's like when a lot of problems like that people named up, they haven't been a problem for 5, in some cases 10 years. But people haven't heard anything since then. Right.
As a case in point, the last time I used FreeBSD for longer than about 5 minutes was 2001, when everything had to be done 100% by hand, and I'm sure there are still a lot of things to do. But that leaves that stigma in my mind of, well, I don't want to have to run XF86 config again.
Yeah.
Random, sorry.
Well, no, like the breaker for me back in the late 90s was I did have to manually configure the TCP/IP connection. And I knew how to do it, because I knew networking and I knew TCP/IP connections. I was in the middle of getting Cisco certifications and stuff, and I'm like, I knew that stuff. I knew how to manually configure IP networks, because this was back before DHCP and all that stuff. But I didn't want to do it. I was like, I could, I don't want to, but they'll get there. I was absolutely convinced with how far they had come in the past few years that, if this has a few more years to cook, it's going to be great. But it just wasn't there yet. But that's why I didn't switch to it then.
We've got entirely off topic.
Yeah, well, anyways, let's it's like, what comments haven't we covered? We covered that one. We covered the GNOME. Oh, this, the only one really left, is comments 2 and 3. And these are really more in line with what we were talking about the last time you were here, Jordan. You have anything? You're more the, James, you're using Ubuntu primarily, right? Or did you switch back to Mint? You keep switching.
I haven't actually switched recently. I've been using Mint.
Okay, never mind.
For more than 6 months.
Okay, okay. So you're on Mint. Sorry.
I've actually been meaning to switch to Ubuntu, but after I saw 10.10, I wasn't impressed enough to switch. And it's more that I was going to switch to 10.10, and then I saw Mint 10.
Mint 10 does look pretty nice, I have to say.
So I'm thinking that I'm going to stick with Mint, and I might have another computer and run Ubuntu server on it to do,
Yeah, you were talking about that the other day.
Yeah, I like them both.
But on these points these people brought up, one of them was basically saying Unity sucks. I'm not sure I agree. I understand where they're coming from, but I'm not sure I agree. And then the other comment is along those lines too, saying Unity's going to divide Ubuntu, because there's people who are going to love it, and there's people like the aforementioned guy who are going to hate it. Ubuntu is why I kind of keep up with it. I don't excessively keep up with it. Y'all keep up with it more than I do. Are these people just trolling, or do they have valid...
I do think the second one in particular about dividing the community...
I mean, that one seemed really valid. Because, I mean, that one seemed really valid, all the things you were reading last time. You know, asking about, can you do this, can you do that? I'm like, they all seemed in line with that. Like, there's going to be some things you can't do in Unity that you could do, in at least as things stand now.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I'm kind of afraid of Ubuntu having. They could add features if they have total control over it. As in, it's not. It is. I believe it's open source, but the thing is, it's their GUI system. The problem is that I don't feel like they're going to commit enough upstream.
Well, I don't know where y'all stand on this. This has always been one of my problems with Ubuntu, and everybody who's getting out their pitchforks, you can stab them in me in a minute, but let me say what I'm gonna say. I've just always felt when Ubuntu starts to make unilateral changes like this, I see Mac. I see a Mac-like company. They're open source. They're still open source. But this just reeks of like a Mac-like thing to do, of taking a unilateral direction, and it for lack of a better word, it's as proprietary as you can get without not being open source. Which it irks me just a little bit, because that's something I don't really like in general. Am I being unfair, or...
I think they've got the right intentions. They're shooting for change, they're shooting for innovation, but they're shooting for everything all at once with a huge a shift. And I don't know if... the good thing is that they are putting in a lot of compatibilities. Things like GNOME 2.x will continue to work with 1104. What is it? When Wayland actually does start to be implemented, Xorg apps will supposedly still continue to work in some way. They'll have some sort of a compatibility layer. I don't know enough about it, until the apps start to migrate. But the problem is, are they just using their clout to force this shift? I mean, it's clear that something.
From my point of view, that is kind of what it feels like. And you know, I may be wrong. They, like you say, they have great intentions. Steve Jobs had great intentions. You know, it's Bill Gates had great intentions. It's like we've seen what happens with good intentions. It's like, so it's like I'm. It's not in my nature to forgive someone just because they had good intentions. I'm like, I hold them responsible for the end result. And the end result's a little shaky here at this point. That's and what'll come about from it. I ultimately, do I think the dust will settle and things will be good? Probably. But what's going to get broke in the meantime, you know, is a concern. I mean, okay, I'm being a little cruel there, but